Howdy, everybody. Welcome in here on a Wednesday. Chad Dales, the host of Trade to Black. Thanks for logging on and checking in with us here today. Nice little announcement this afternoon that we got. 90-day extension with these tariffs. That's probably some welcoming news that we all kind of been happy about and glad to hear this afternoon. Wouldn't want to be in China now, but based on some of the announcements that President Trump made here today. But long story short, good to see that these tariffs got delayed by 90 days. We'll see where we go from here. But also some interesting news that happened out of Germany here today, where their coalition announced that they're going to keep the CanG law in place. So cannabis reform as it is right now will stay intact. So that's welcoming news. Hey, we got to win for the cannabis industry. We got to take them when we get them. So with that, let's welcome in AV here on a Wednesday. And that was welcoming news in Germany, was it not?
Yeah, it was great to see. I know there was some ambiguity around that when the elections happened a couple months back, and to see that CanG is going to stay in place. And we knew that that was going to be one of the, sticking points if they wanted to coalesce around the other groups and form government. It's good. We needed some positive news this week.
Didn't we?
Trump paused the tariffs. He basically told everybody to buy ahead of time, which is crazy. The president of the United States told everyone to buy the dip and then dropped the headline 3 hours later. So I don't know if that's him saying, hey guys, take this as a consolation prize, or trying to make amends for the market carnage, but it was quite interesting to see in real time. It's a good day.
Happy burner. First time Dow hit 3,000 in a day in history. Wow. Yeah. A lot of volatility and a lot of stuff going up and down this week. But man, oh man, I feel like I've gone through about a month in these first 3 days this week. A lot's going on, that's for sure, as you're looking at the market and some of your investments.
MSOS and MSOX both retraced. I think MSOX was up 15% intraday. It closed the day up 4%.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, market up, cannabis down again.
Yeah. Well, we got some good news. Let's take it as we can see it. As I said, the German coalition announced no changes to its current CanG law. And with that, we're going to welcome in our first guest. His name is Dr. Julian Wickman. Good to, for the first time of the podcast. Good to meet you, sir. How are things?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. I think a lot of our viewers just, as we're starting to learn more and more, in the past, we used to have a lot of Americans, cannabis companies that talked about the German market. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know if we didn't know if we learned as much, but we had Finn Hansel on last month, and the trip that Anthony and I just made to Washington, we're learning a ton. And we've obviously built a great relationship with Artemis Growth Partners with Stanton and Will, who've done an incredible job that connect us with people like yourselves. They have a large investment in the European market. But real quick, you're a trained medical doctor, published researcher, and the co-founder of a company that's called Bloomwell Group, which is the largest prescriber and marketplace for medical cannabis in Germany. So with that, what was some of the main reasons why you launched what you did and the footprint that you're building within the German market right now?
So we launched actually a couple of years ago. So we launched in 2020, actually. And we were the first. So no one had done that before, and everybody kept telling us that it's impossible. And we, went fully prepared and launched the first platform. Obviously, a lot of changes and improvements and growth along the way. And definitely the CanG that you already mentioned that went into effect last year had a tremendous impact. So growth has been, steadily rising since then, obviously.
It's what we keep learning more and more and more. Getting a few people from Germany under the live stream here today. Greetings, Martin. Great to have you on. I don't know if that's the first time you've watched us and streamed with us online, but great to have you here. But as I said off the top, Germany's coalition government, they officially confirmed that there would be no rollback to the CanG law. So from your perspective, what kind of signal does that send, to the medical cannabis industry, the patients relying on access, which clearly is going to be positive, right?
Yeah, I think, first of all, that's that's definitely good news for cannabis, but it's also good news for Germany. So keep in mind where we come from. I think for two reasons mainly. One, from politician perspective, maybe financially, obviously, because this is a booming industry, importing I think close to 80 tons last year. So that results in a lot of jobs being created, a lot of taxes being paid also to the government. So that's I think the more financial side of it. The second one is obviously for patients, for doctors, for healthcare in general. We built Bloomwell because we wanted to make the access easy. So through our platform, it's end to end, from I'm interested in medical cannabis to I get a prescription, I have a doctor online, I get it shipped to home. It's an all-in journey, and I think that's also necessary for cannabis, because what didn't work in the past was I need to find a doctor somewhere and maybe they have any experience with cannabis, and that is just not how it works. And that's why telemedicine is huge. And so the news today actually didn't come that unexpected for us. I think we've gotten also pretty good to kind of read through the smoke and see what would happen and what is the most likely scenario. What's interesting, nevertheless, is that if you look at the campaigning that before the election was taking place, the CDU, the Conservative Party was very actively against cannabis and wanted to revert the law completely. So that would include medical, but also the recreational aspect, so home grow, and also the cannabis clubs. And the SPD, who was the party who was actually brought that law into place in the coalition before, was defending that law. And so I think what we saw today is a compromise that is expected, exactly, which means, and if you read what was published today, it's basically saying, first of all, no one's talking about reverting the law, which we didn't expect to happen, but still. And the exact phrasing is there's going to be a survey and a scientific analysis of the effects of the CanG, of the cannabis law. And this is the important part, it's open-ended and it's also open-minded, I think, is the reading. So we are expecting that the medical aspect, the medical cannabis market and the access to patients, especially, which is the most important, will not be touched. I think we're expecting there may be some compromises, because still the CDU, who had the stronger election results, there may be some compromises on the recreational part, because I think they will have to do something. But what we've seen is, I think, smart policing so far. And so good day for Germany,
Yeah, I think that's
you had mentioned that there's up to 80 tons that are imported currently into the German market. And I'm assuming if we're talking about the German market on a go-forward basis, there's a lot of growth that's going to occur, with a lot of that cannabis that's being imported has been coming from Canada via the Canadian LPs. How is the German government and how are the companies that are actually on the ground looking as far as cultivation goes on a go-forward basis to start producing domestically? As it relates to the actual flower?
Yeah, I think that depends on who you ask. I think obviously there's German companies in the market who are also producing. Us, from a telemedicine perspective, our approach is global, to be honest. So, good quality medical cannabis is available basically worldwide. So you import it from where there's consistently good quality, experience, and also good prices. And the prices have come way down. I think that's also an important thing that had a tremendous impact on cannabis in Germany, medical cannabis. So when we started with Bloomwell, if you went to the normal pharmacies, you would be actually paying 20 euros per gram of flour. And that is now down to an average of about 7, sometimes even lower. So it has also become much more affordable. And the consequence of that is that we're seeing more people who actually went to the illicit market before, because it was also cheaper. And now they're actually, going to doctors and confirming, yes, I've been actually treating migraine, headaches, chronic pain, etc. for years. But now that's I think an interesting situation, and maybe new to the US perspective. In Germany right now, medical cannabis is cheaper than illicit cannabis.
And then as far as the rolling out of the pillars are concerned with the German system, obviously I think they've been slow playing the rolling out of the adult use model within Germany. Does this signal anything, like the CDU combined with the SPD are kind of going to get more comfortable as it relates to potentially moving the system forward, relating to overall adult use coming online at some form in the years to come?
That's a good question. I think no one has the answer to that right now. Probably not even CDU and SPD. I think what we saw, especially in comparison to the campaigning before the elections, cannabis is not a huge part of that coalition contract that needs changing. So right now they're kind of hands off and not touching it, because I mean, that's really the true situation in Germany. There's much bigger things to tackle right now, from finance world, safety, and so on. So I think the main result today is that this is not in the main focus of a new government. I think it's most likely that no big changes are coming. maybe some minor changes along the way, which means also, at least from the position right now, I think full-on recreational use would have to go a couple hurdles and step and also be in the focus of both parties, which I think is not the situation right now. So the current lookout is medical is actually also the most accessible, also safest way, to be honest, to cannabis. That has been defended, so that's good. And anything else that's to come, I think we will hopefully hear about the next upcoming weeks and months.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the numbers I learned from Finn Hansel last month about some of the medical numbers that came out and the growth that's happened has been tremendous. I do want to get into that. Before we get into like that, there was actually one of our viewers, Mark Landers, actually wrote what is this announced review that they're announcing this fall, because there's been some chatter around potentially reclassifying the medical cannabis as a narcotic, especially from figures like SPD Health Minister, hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly, his name's Clemens Hoek, who raised some concerns about how easily cannabis can be accessed online. So from your perspective, like how serious should people, I guess, interpret this as far as the reclassification discussion, or do you think everything just stays the status quo like we just got today?
Yeah, so first of all, the cannabis is referenced in one sentence in the coalition agreement. So there's limited information out there, and it's really only about probably in fall we will start a review, and that will also take years. So I think it's not a one-shot thing, but it'll be a survey period. I mean, last year there was a big step, and there was a big step by the SPD to take cannabis out of the narcotic law. So I think to go that step back, there would have to be a huge reason or a huge risk even to general health in Germany, which is not the case. So what we have not seen, what was also feared actually from the CDU in the past, was that psychiatry would be full of cannabis patients, or other things that could go wrong, and none of that has happened. Actually, I think the general health in Germany, and also the usage of health services, meaning has decreased. So that means people are not going to their local doctor and asking about cannabis and then hearing, I can't give you cannabis prescription because I have no experience. They go straight to telemedicine companies and go and get the medication. So it has been both a systemic and also financial relief actually for the health insurances also. And I think that will get into effect. So we're not seeing a reclassification narcotic now. There's obviously always individual politicians who have an opinion. I actually reached out personally to Minister Hoek because I wanted to offer some insight into this, and unfortunately he didn't have time. But I think the general consensus is this is a law that was passed and was passed for good. And I don't think both parties right now are planning to revert that law or revert parts of the law.
Well, keep knocking on that door, because I'm sure eventually he'll take your call. But I think that's the part, is keep the conversation going. But there's a recent survey. It showed 55% of Germans oppose repealing the CanG law, and only 36% are in favor of going back. So there you go. And that's a pretty wide spread. So that's encouraging. And I'm sure those are some of the numbers that you would share with them, correct?
Yeah, and we just also published, there's a Forbes piece that came out, I think, yesterday, based on Bloomwell data, where we did a survey on more than 1,000 patients, and we asked specifically on their experience with medical cannabis in comparison for treatment of sleeping disorder, in comparison to OTC medication and prescription medication, which can have severe side effects. And the results were what we know on a daily basis, but I think it was good to have it out there, the data, that more than 70% of people say this works well for me. And I think I would have to check the exact numbers, but more than 85% said this works better than other medication for me. So I think slowly this takes time in Germany, obviously. The consensus that especially the medical cannabis access is a very safe access with very low side effects to general health. I think that's starting to get noticed by politicians. So as I said in the beginning, I think if there will be change, or also the big trigger, especially for a conservative party, is probably more the full-on recreational use. So at least right now, I wouldn't expect a major step forward right now. Could still happen, no one knows. But it's important to look at those things separately, and also look at, I think, Europe and Germany separately from the US, because I spent some time in the US, so I know that their healthcare is always associated with high costs and limited access. In Germany, it's actually the other way around, and that's why people are going into medical cannabis, I think, a lot, instead of trying to go into recreational.
Yeah.
So talking about the U.S. market, when I look at Germany, and I've been paying attention to the cannabis industry now for, let's say, the last decade, the German model, you could argue, has gotten it right. Slow rollout, medical focus in terms of, let's say, Canada, the United States.
Always room for improvement. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
How would you rate what's going on in the United States compared to how Germany's rolled out their system? Because our system, you could argue, is in flux right now, and it's really grown too quickly to regulate it and reverse engineer where we need to go to be a system such as the German system, which looks like it's working very efficiently right now, especially on a global scale, looking at all the countries around the world that have legalized cannabis to a certain extent.
Be kind here with your response.
Of course. And we're only talking about cannabis, right? Not general.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think those are two very different systems. So, in Germany, the different states, that's a much more synchronized approach in general.
Mhm.
Whereas in the US, if you go from one state to the other, a whole set of different laws is coming into effect. So I think that's much more complicated, and also from an ideology, very different states, even if you just compare Texas versus California, I guess.
Mhm.
So that's hard to roll out completely. I think what Germany undertook back then was because they even traveled to various countries, not just US, but even Uruguay, to figure out what would be a good approach. And then they still had to fight a lot, both internally, but also within Germany with other parties to come along. And it definitely, I mean, it may look like it right now, but it definitely wasn't a straight line. It was a lot of ups and downs, including also for the cannabis companies involved. But in the end, I think it was a smart decision, and still room for improvement, because, as you said, I mean, more things were planned and weren't rolled out, and they're kind of hanging now. So let's see what actually happens. I think a good approach would be to go data-based, because what we've definitely learned from the past discussions and the different parties, that there's very different opinions and they continue to clash. And so just looking at maybe a little bit more basic and boring data, and that's what we're also trying to supply with Bloomwell, to show safety, and just break some suspicions and ideas that are floating around, because the typical cannabis patient is really, fully employed, often has a family, and just needs something for sleeping disorders that works. And that's a very, very safe, and also, if you look at it from a healthcare perspective point, a very cheap way, because instead of going to different doctors and specialists and actually going on sick leave, which also creates further cost to the economy, those people just say this works well for me, and I can go back to my job in the morning, and I can even drive a car. So I think the base is good. Let's see how we can continue from here.
Yeah. Some of our viewers here, Anthony, are even saying that not only is it cheaper, but the quality's better. It's something that you don't see in the American market, right?
Yeah, I think I think it's much more transparent. So the good thing in Germany is, like, you can go online, you can compare. It's a very transparent process, and it has come away from this, hey, do you know someone, or do you know where to go? And it's even on the news, it's even on TV. So I think that's the good thing, maybe. Whereas in the US, when I visited some stores, you couldn't even pay with card, because it's a cash only business for regulations. With us, like, it's all, you can pay Amex at the point. So I think it's transparency is key.
Yeah, we're getting some feedback here where we need to hire a German reporter. So once you sell your company, Julian, feel free to join our team. But
we're getting a lot of freelance. We're
getting some good German response here today. But I appreciate everybody for commenting right now. A couple other questions. We've had some different numbers, but all we know is it's growing a lot. How many patients are there right now in Germany? Do you know?
Yeah, no one knows. That's a great question. That's, for example, an area where Germany could definitely improve, because, I mean, there's no registry, but there's no way of actually measuring it. So I think we're somewhere in the hundreds of thousands. I think we haven't crossed 1 million yet, but we're probably on the way to it. But actually, no one knows. All we can look at is the importing data, and that has increased. I think on a year-over-year comparison, close to 300%. I think the last year, from what I saw. So yeah, that's
now, is there no formal database, because the system's not like here where you actually need a medical card to partake in the system, and they can then just do like a roll call? or is it just the way that the medical data, I guess, is protected as well in Germany, that you can't see on the patient level who's actually being prescribed?
Yeah, so for medical, there is no central registry. There was one a couple of years ago, but that was before the narcotic application. So there is not one. It's also a different system. So you can't just get a card and then just do what you want. You have to always get a prescription online, although it's very easy. So it's a different approach, and that's what we actually don't know. And also because the prescriptions are not going through the general statutory healthcare reimbursement. So that's actually the numbers we do have, but that's probably a fraction of 10% maybe of that whole market. So we only have estimations. And I agree. I mean, that would help to improve, because I think acceptance of the general public is going way up. And I think we're close to 1% or more of people in Germany, and if you actually break it down into adults, it's even more, being cannabis patients. So that's a relevant mass in that market.
Absolutely. I mean, in Florida, I'm in Florida, and our medical program, there's basically a leaderboard. The OMMU, which is the governing body in the state of Florida for medical cannabis, they tell you how many patients are there on a weekly basis. So that number is just, we're almost at 940,000 patients in the state of Florida right now, which is impressive. But everyone's watching it, waiting to get to 1 million.
I mean, the question is also, what do you consider a patient? Meaning, from an activity does it mean once per year, like one prescription per year is an active patient? We had those questions actually ourselves.
Great question.
Yeah, for us, it's literally just cards. It's, do you have a medical card, or did you get prescribed a medical card?
Even if it's not used.
Even if it's not used, that's it.
One thing we learned in Washington, Anthony, is that you understand the clear message in the European market. It's medical first. And I think that's what's helping getting support from local governments, from individual countries, which is a breath of fresh air, to say the least, in comparison to what's going on in the US right now. But Hurton writes,
it's also just to add on, I think it's a very different perspective in Europe, because if you look at who brought that law into place, it was the health ministry. Right. So that tells you a lot on how that law was modified and what was the intent of the law. And truly, the intent of the law back then, and I think still is, was to improve the general health, the general public, by getting rid or kind of abolishing the illicit market. And so that's the theory. And I think that's important to understand from a US perspective. It's not about legalizing cannabis mainly. It was about getting rid of the side effects of cannabis and making cannabis healthy.
All right. Hurton writes, Shad looks intense, so I'll smile. Hopefully I'm not as intense. But last thing I want to bring up is, I was reading, in addition to you being a prescriber, you're also a digital ecosystem. You link patients, doctors, suppliers, and pharmacies under one platform. You recently reported showing a staggering 1,000% increase in prescriptions since the law came into effect last April. So I know I asked before how many patients are in Germany, but some of the numbers I keep hearing, it's grown from 200,000 to close to 1 million in one full year. But you can understand Anthony's saying close to 1 million in Florida, and that's very impressive, to say the least, with 22 million people. Then you factor in Germany with 84 million people. There's some big upside potential within the country, right?
I think our comparison has always been Florida, actually, as a state. So, and I think Germany is outgrowing Florida, especially if you look at the future. I mean, this law has been in effect now just over a year. That's not a long time for law and all the effects of it to come into place. So I think there will be tremendous growth, and more importantly, I think acceptance by the general public. I mean, my idea was always, like, if you just switch on TV and you look at a normal TV show, right now you don't see anyone taking medical cannabis, like in a thriller or like a movie, right? It's still something special, and maybe there will be jokes. So I think kind of the point will be when someone takes medical cannabis in a TV show, in a movie or something, and that's normal. That will be the baseline for this has really reached the general public.
It's a good point. Well, it was great catching up with you and meeting you for the first time, and more importantly, just being educated in what this news means moving forward. But Julian, appreciate the time, and let's keep in touch, okay?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
All right. Co-founder of Bloomwell, and I was going to say future TDR German correspondent, Julian Wickman. But Yeah, it was a good day in Germany, and a big win, I think, not only for Germans, but the overall industry. But there were some questions saying, who would you say is some of the big players with German footprint, but are the Canadian LPs? You got to factor in Organigram.
The ones on the ground are Tilray and Aurora.
Tilray and Aurora.
They're actually cultivating. They've got Organigram doesn't have a license.
Well, they have investments in Germany with Sanity Group, is what I'm saying.
But they don't cultivate domestically on the ground. Sanity's just prescriber. It's a prescriber network, if I'm not mistaken.
I guess it all depends on the term footprint. But yeah, okay. Maybe I read that wrong. But sorry, continue your thought. Cureleaf, but they're not a Canadian LP. Finish your thought. Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, it's Tilray, Aurora, Demican, and then there's one other licensed producer that produces flower in the German market. And then obviously you have all of the Canadian LPs that are exporting to Germany currently.
All right, that concludes our first segment here on a Trade to Black here on a Wednesday. Get your popcorn ready and buckle up your seats, because let's bring on our next guest, popular figure in the cannabis space, as we head now shift to the nation's capital, and Mr. Don Murphy. Good to see you, sir. How are things?
Good to see you, Twitter friends and Twitter haters alike. It's good to be back.
How's it going, sir?
I was thinking about this before the live stream. Like, how do I set this up without creating a bomb? But you've been pretty vocal, my friend, on Twitter as of recently. And I don't want this to turn into like some shouting match where we're complaining about the industry. And, you know, I obviously always want to give this platform a voice for everybody that, you know, whether it's good, bad, positive, not positive, whatever people are thinking. But at the same time, too, you got to do your due diligence and maybe like counter some of the feedback you provided. But what can you share?
Is that your way of saying the opinions of the host of the guest are not necessarily that of the host? Or
that was the most politically correct disclaimer you'll ever see.
Did you like that? Press Secretary Shad Dale's here on Trade to Black. Yeah. But listen, what have you been doing recently in Washington? And like, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? Is there any kind of momentum regarding some of the conversations you have with SAFE? Like, share with us, because it's been a while since we've had you on last.
All right, I'm gonna like lay out the personal, because you know I can't sit here and say I've been to Washington for the past 3 weeks. I was there today for the hemp hearing.
How was that?
It was very poorly attended. It was Gretchen and myself, and as it turns out, a lobbyist for Attach, but no one else. Okay. And you know, you say what you want, but I don't know. Like, we do not have hearings related to cannabis or hemp or anything adjacent to those on a regular basis. Like, I don't know how you don't show up for these things. And, you know, I'll take a shot at the industry, but I don't expect, by the way, I don't expect Kim or Charlie or Boris to show up at these things. They pay people a lot of money to be in Washington and show up, and they don't show up. And I don't understand why they keep doing it.
So question, what could the benefits have been for showing up to that hearing and having a presence?
I talked to the chairman. I talked to the next governor of Florida. I talked to a number of members. I talked to a senator on the way in who I happened to cross paths with in a good way. You've got to have these conversations. And one of the conversations I had was with a member that said, "Where is everybody?" I mean, he all but called me out by name, and then he afterwards in the halls was like, "Where is everybody?" Like, in Texas, they were testifying for like 10 hours, and today nobody shows up. When you play sports, there's a difference between a home game and an away game, because your friends and your family and your fans are there.
Yeah,
we didn't have that.
But wasn't this hearing today based on the FDA not moving on regulations as it relates to CBD?
It was related. It was hemp and cannabis adjacent. It doesn't matter. Like, it was part of the process, part of the issue. And we even had a witness that was there, a Democrat witness. Actually, he was a Democrat, a witness for the Republicans from Kentucky who runs a hemp organization. So, people should have been there. It didn't make any sense. And let me just say that.
Go ahead.
One of the reasons that I'm a little chippy the last few weeks is, and I didn't share this with a lot of folks, I know you know, my wife had a fall about 3 weeks ago, shattered both legs, multiple, like She has not walked in 3 weeks.
Oh.
In a hospital for a month, for a week, in a hotel with a handicap accessible for 2.5 weeks. I left her there alone to go to this hearing. Now, I'm a better lobbyist than I am a husband right now. Okay. So if I was there, I don't know why anybody has, what excuse could you have for not showing up?
Here's what I'm sorry to hear that, Don. I really do. I think, look, we applaud everything that you do when you go to Washington. I also think that there's different strategies that are in play here. And I don't want to get into like what those strategies are about and whether or not they work, but that's what's been going on behind the scenes since the Trump administration stepped into office. I do know that the Cannabis Roundtable is meeting with 20 members tonight, another 30 meetings tomorrow with constituents, being there. And this is all part of a broader scheme type approach towards this. And I wanted to get on and just say, this person is right and this person's wrong. That's not the whole goal here. I think the idea is that what your approach is walking the hallways, which is badly needed to have that conversation. But I also think it's important to understand that some of the stuff that's going behind the scenes and some of the meetings that are taking place may not be at these hearings, but they are meeting with people behind the scenes to push the narrative forward. And I think that's what needs to be communicated as well. Make sense?
Well, it makes sense, but I never see them on the Hill. So it's not just
my point is that maybe that's not their role. Maybe that's not their approach that they're trying to do, is to be on the Hill. If they're actually having these private meetings behind the scenes and speaking to various people, especially on the business side, something that you openly and express to, that business is not your main priority. You want actual reform, but there is a business involved in all this. And this is some of the approach that they're taking behind the scenes. And the 20 meetings tonight, followed by the 30 meetings tomorrow, obviously applies, with a different strategy as to what you're doing. Makes sense?
Well, yeah, it would make sense, but I've been watching this thing for 10 years now. And the industry more recently that's developed has just been a failure. And I just can't help, but I got to say it is. And, part of the problem is that many of the folks in this industry come from the far left, the progressives, and they pander to the left, which they started doing in 2018 after Democrats took over control of the House. Everything was social justice. Everything was DEI. Everything was woke policy. Everything was, taxes, and then spend those tax dollars on issues that Republicans didn't care about. And now Republicans control everything, and they come in with the same cast of characters. I just don't understand it.
Yeah. Well, so really, all in all, what you're saying is like dialogue right now. There hasn't been many conversations pertaining to SAFE. I know you've been tied up for the past 3 weeks, but even prior to that, what's your take on some of the feedback from the Trump administration? They announced last week some of their drug policies for 2025, cannabis rescheduling. I know that's not something you partake too much in that conversation, but are you still a firm believer that we will see some sort of change under this administration?
I absolutely am. And the funny part is I've become the new Exhibit A for safe banking, because I go to a settlement on a property on Friday and I had to come up with cash because I couldn't get a mortgage. Couldn't get a mortgage. And I'm a non-plant toucher, right? They just saw cannabis in the title of the organization that I work in under.
Really?
And so they won't touch it, which is really gotten me some great conversations with members who don't quite understand this, or maybe don't know anyone who's had a problem because of the lack of banking. And I'm now Exhibit A. So it's I got firsthand experience for what hundreds of thousands of cannabis employees are going through. And quite it's kind of, it's neat in a strange way.
Yeah.
I know you don't like to kiss and tell, but any interesting data points from speaking with Representative Donalds?
The truth is, I can't. No, I can't.
I thought you were going to go there.
I knew
I wanted to. But
I figured I would ask.
Yeah. That's the reason I keep having conversations with him. I don't kiss and tell, and that makes
we ran into
crazy.
him. We ran into him on our way out of, not the Dirksen building, Longworth. On our way out of the Longworth meeting. Great guy, sat there and shot the shit with us for a couple minutes. Had some things to say about Florida. I look forward to him getting in the race and starting to make some noise down here.
Very down to earth, congressman.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if cannabis a legalization comes up in that primary, if there is a primary, if it's DeSantis and Donalds, it would be better that it not come up because both will want to move to the right, if you will. Look,
yeah.
You know, we can say it's an 80-20 issue, but clearly in Florida, it's a 56.
I was going to say it's a
44% issue, and the 44 tend to vote in Republican primaries. So Donalds is not going to want to go there. Nobody should want to drag him there until after the primary, and then have him come out assuming that he wins the primary. If Trump puts his thumb on the scale, which he's already done, that bodes well for his success in the primary for sure.
Yeah.
So you think it could come out after the fact if the primary is concluded, if it winds up being Donalds against John Morgan for the gubernatorial seat?
Well, yeah. In fact, if John Morgan's the nominee, then Donalds is probably going to have to go there and want to go there to diffuse that as an issue. Just take it off the table.
Yeah. I'm hoping that's the matchup that we get. So it's just front and center and completely out in the open.
Well, but let's be fair. If you're going to go on one side or the other,
yeah,
you know, the 56% that voted yes is the place you want to be, right? Donalds does not need 60% to win. He needs a simple majority to be governor. So that would be a smart play in the general.
Yeah, I view it as a win, or maybe not a win, but a positive off the announcement last week with Sarah Carter being appointed as the new drug czar. Did you see that announcement? You clearly did. And, you know, I look at it as a positive, and I see you nodding your head. So you agree?
Yeah, look, and we can talk about Pam Bondi, and we can talk about Coles, and we can talk about some of these other folks who have been appointed. They were the second choice. Remember, the first choice was always a good guy. You know, was Gates or, you know, the sheriff from down there who was good. You know, I don't think Trump picked these. He didn't pick Bondi because she was good or bad on cannabis policy. Not at all.
Yeah.
As much as we want to question Matt Gates's moral integrity, which is ambiguous at best, if he was Attorney General right now, I think we'd be rescheduled already.
You do?
Well, he's out there screaming about it already.
Yeah. I'll say this on the timing, and I don't like to get into the timing, but of things, because who knows? But if I'm a political guy, advisor for the president or for the Republicans, I don't want anything happening until next April, right? Because people have short memories. What have you done for me lately? Oh, you might have legalized that 12 months ago, but what have you done lately?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, here's a surprise. Gretchen is actually disagreeing with you. It doesn't matter at all. Don't care about Sarah Carter. This is where Don and I disagree. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we'll take. Look, we do disagree on things, and it's great. And that's why it's, you know, fun for us both to walk the hallways together. But you know, look, we're both big believers that you cannot put all your eggs in the administrative basket, in the executive branch basket. You've got to work the Congress, and that's just for too long not happened.
Yeah.
You know, Republicans don't have anybody on the R side, and I said this. I've asked this over and over. Tell me a cannabis industry executive who came out and supported Trump, you know, endorsed Trump prior to the election. You know, like, so what? You show up after the election, nobody cares. Nobody cares then.
Well,
right?
I wanted to make sure I did my due diligence here before today.
You did.
There's your valid points, but I wanted to reach out, and they have a different approach is what they continue to say. And actually, they're making more progress behind the scenes than what most people understand, the most that they've ever actually been involved within this industry. And another thing is they had conducted 500 meetings last year. That's all public records that they have to basically track those records or meetings after every single one's done with some of the members that I spoke with. I know there's going to be some disagreements, but I also think too, let's unite. And, you know, I understand completely why everyone's frustrated that we want change because the industry has been hit hard. But I think the big takeaway here is right now is that you still firmly believe that this administration is eventually going to get something done. I think that's the takeaway.
And I think it would help if the industry would hold people accountable. And I'm not just talking about their lobby. I'm talking about elected officials. I don't recall anyone coming out and tearing into Schumer for the failure to bring safe banking to the floor.
Yeah.
None. And you can blame Republicans. Oh, we didn't have enough Republicans. How will we ever know? We won't. All we know is it didn't die on the floor. It died in Schumer's drawer. That's where that bill stayed. And it's all on him. No one did that. No one.
So I get everything that you're saying, Don, completely. However, when I look at what you're saying with having the cannabis CEOs endorse Trump before the election or come out and fight Schumer, I can't help but think when Michael Jordan said that Republicans buy sneakers as well, and he just kind of said that he shuts his mouth when it comes to true politics, because at the end of the day, the organizations that these CEOs are running have plenty of Democrats and plenty of Republicans that are their consumers. And at the end of the day, I do think that they care more about the bottom line than them publicly endorsing these politicians, regardless of how much we want to say that it's going to impact their business.
And let's just say,
and I'm not trying to make excuses.
Let's just say you're exactly right. What benefit is it to a Republican to come out and support their effort? There's zero, right? Think about this. First of all, let's take the Jordan thing. If sneakers were illegal and one side came out and said, yeah, make them legal, and the other side sat on their hands, which is exactly what happened with Amendment 3 in Florida. Trump came out and supported Truliev's ballot initiative.
Yeah.
And Harris didn't. Like, that alone should have been reason for him to go, for them to go all in for him. But they didn't. They waited till after the election.
Right.
They showed up at the inaugural ball and had a bunch of pictures and acted like everything was great.
And I mean, I agree with you, but at the same time, the Florida initiative, Kim put the entire thing on her back. I mean, you had CEOs from a lot of the other big companies in the state of Florida that did nothing. They sat there and just sat on their hands, didn't contribute any sort of manpower, anything, bandwidth, anything. They just let Kim incinerate $140 million and said, look, you've got the most to gain. Get it all done for us. And if you don't, it's not really our problem.
Right. And don't misunderstand. Let's not conflate these two, because that's what everybody wants to do. They want to say Murphy says, Trulieve didn't do anything. No, they did plenty, but they did plenty for their own benefit, not for Trump's. Right. This was going to benefit them. This was going to benefit the market and consumers for sure. Mm-hmm. Absolutely for sure. I have a lot of issues. I take a lot of issues with the way they went about that campaign. And I hope they don't blow up another $100 million doing it in the next election, which, by the way, will have a slightly, maybe even a significantly different turnout model in a statewide election than in a national presidential election. Yeah. People turn out differently. So don't think like whenever the Marijuana Policy Project would do these things, they always put most of their chips on presidential years, and that's when they had the most success.
All right. So our good friend Tom Angel is on here and writes, come on, I'm not a Dem or a Harris apologist, but she endorsed federal legalization and Trump didn't. You're giving an incomplete picture by just focusing on Amendment 3. My friend Don. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because I remember when Joe Rogan wanted her on, one of the first things that her team said that she couldn't talk about was cannabis. And I raised a few eyebrows to me. That's for sure.
Yeah. And just
rascal. Honestly, rascal.
Look, we're talking about
Aaron, get him out of here. I don't want somebody using that kind of language. Like, maybe not get him out of here, but let's not have this type of stuff where we're talking like this back and forth each other, people.
We're talking about Florida, and we're talking about Trump endorsing legalization in Florida. So yeah, I think there's a lot, and he voted for it, which is more than Harris can say that she did in California. She couldn't even say it. Like, do we really think she was going to do anything? Did she believe it? No.
Yeah.
So, people were tired of that. She wasn't genuine.
Yeah. Anyways. All right.
So where do we go from here?
Yeah. Where do we go from here? Great.
Where do we need to go from here as an industry?
Well, I will say, and I don't represent the industry. I don't get paid. I don't get paid by the hemp people either.
So let's just rephrase that. Where do we go from here? Where do we go from here as a movement on the normalization of cannabis in the United States?
Well, in a lot of ways, we keep moving forward, and we keep injecting this into the conversation whenever we can. At a hemp hearing, you bring it up. At a banking hearing, you bring it up. You get your members in Congress to bring this thing up so that it becomes not a front burner issue, but an issue that can be tackled in this 2-year term, right?
Yeah.
Trump has 4 years, but nobody can guarantee that he'll have the House for 4 years. And if he loses the House, that's the reason now is the time to do it. You got to do it now. And look, the inconsistency and the hypocrisy is starting to rise up. Once Trump gets through so many of these other 100-day issues and these 80-20 issues get taken care of, then we can start to talk about this. There are people that are very close to President Trump that have his ear, that are very much on our side. I'd much rather be us than Sam. If all Sam has is Pete Sessions quoting Elton John at this hearing today, if that's all you got, you don't got much.
No.
Right. So I am very bullish on cannabis policy reform in the next 18 months.
Yeah.
Incredibly. Now, just to be clear, I'm not invested in it. Not at all. Right.
Yeah.
So that's not my thing. I do broad-based index funds, period. That's kind of it.
And just for those that don't know, I know Gretchen had said above that SAFE is getting introduced in June. What does that mean?
Well, it now needs to start in the House, not in the Senate, right? Republicans in the House need to move this thing forward so that it gets to the Senate with Republican support, serious Republican support. Otherwise, we're going to have a hard time. And I think at some point, the president will, in his way, put his thumb on the scale. Maybe not publicly, but he's probably going to say something to somebody. And I think this will get done.
Yeah. Well, listen, I know Gretchen's been very vocal as to being vocal and you have to show up. I get that, but I'm also hearing conflicting stories to say that there are different approaches. So I'm going to have Saphira on next week as well. I'm going to get her angle and talk to her conversations, but I think it's just open dialogue that we need to have. But there is stuff that is being done behind the scenes, but I'm not going to doubt basically your approach and how you're doing things, because I think it's great with what you do time and time again. But I think there was one more question that somebody brought up was, when is the next bill? What was that? Or did you ask that question already? When is the next bill that safe banking can get thrown into? Do we know that?
Well, we can probably get thrown into just about anything. I mean, these omnibus bills, that's how, and I don't like that, by the way. That's how bad stuff happens, right? As a conservative, no. These individual bills should be single subject bills.
Yeah.
But look, you can do both. I've had meetings behind the scenes, but you can be working the halls and talking to members too. If all you're doing is talking to staff, I did the staff thing. I did the staff thing years ago. They kind of pat you on the head. Yeah, we agree. And then they never talk to the member.
Yeah.
They're just not the same.
All right. Well, listen, I want to get your voice on here because I know people value your opinion and your voice based on the experience that you do day in and day out. But I'm glad that we cleared up some of the air a little bit. But more importantly, as I said before, the big takeaway here is that you still firmly believe that this administration will get something done. So I think that's the most important thing that we need to focus on moving forward as an industry as a whole. But as always, all the well wishes going out to your wife. I hope she gets better. And how's she doing today? Is she all right?
Honestly, I really don't even know. I sent her a text. I haven't heard back. She's got a friend that came over to visit this afternoon. But when I left her this morning, she was the one that said, you got to go. You just got to go.
Yeah.
So, here.
Yeah. Well, we met her briefly in Washington last year. Very, very nice lady, and always very appreciative, Anthony and I, and all of us here at TDR, for the time and efforts that you give us to walk us around Washington. So let's keep in touch, my friend. And thanks for logging on here today. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thanks, Don. Well, that was good. And Yeah, I thought that was a good takeaway that he still firms, he's got some valid points, but at the same time too, as I said in my discussion with him, as you probably heard, that there are different approaches that are taking place too. And I think people should understand that there are meetings that are going on, there are strategies that are in play, and it's just a different approach. But more importantly, it's that there's more progress from what we see and hear as to what's going on behind the scenes in the industry right now that most people are not probably realizing. And of course, they're not going to realize that right now. But it's getting into April. We're into second chance month. We're getting past that 90-day threshold soon. So it'll be interesting to see how things progress here in the spring.
Yeah, it's going to. And I mean, I think it's an interesting data point that you had mentioned that they had conducted 500 meetings. I think you said last year. It's a function of, okay, that's a nice number, but what does that get us? Where did that get us? What's the quantifiable metric of success from those meetings? Or is it just blowing smoke and just talking in a room? So I can't really argue that we're any closer today than we were a year ago, in light of those 500 meetings. But obviously it's an open dialogue, and I think it's important to get both sides of the argument as it relates to moving the needle forward in Washington for the cannabis industry.
The perception out there right now, because we haven't had any change right now, is definitely that. But again, we're going to have more conversations next week to find out, some of those concerns that you just outlined. And are we getting closer? And I'd like to think that we are, even though on paper, people may think I'm crazy to say something like that. But it is what it is for now, but the only way to find out more clarification and transparency is to have the right people on. So as I said before, Safira Galoob, we've reached out to her as well this afternoon to see if we can get her on next week. She's obviously the representative from the United States Cannabis Roundtable, and she's been on a few times, which I know a lot of people all of you are very familiar with. So with that, good podcast today. What'd you think?
Yeah, solid.
I thought so too. Great, a lot of responses. Nice to see some of our viewers from over in Germany that joined us today. And look, if we don't get any cannabis reform, you ever thought about moving to Germany? You thought about moving to Europe?
I would move to England if I was going to move to Europe.
You got the British passport. How many years has it been since they defected from the EU? Has that been 7-8 years?
About that. Yeah. I think it was 2017. I think it was.
I'm the wrong person to be saying, but how has that worked out for them? Maybe I should know this, but I really don't know much about that.
I don't know. Brexit was 2020, not too long ago.
Was it 2020?
Yeah. I guess COVID makes you think of longer time frames.
Mark Landers, he's from the UK, England, no free speech. Is that the case, Mark?
Yeah, no, England's kind of going backwards. There's a ton of immigrants there. It's way worse than here. In that regard, and just the social fabric of what's kind of built the culture in the country over the last couple of centuries is, from my understanding, is deteriorating.
I saw that even back in 2010. Mark, if you're still listening, I used to work at Channel 5 in London for about 2-3 years. I would travel back and forth. Got to attend an event at the Camden Roundhouse. You ever been there, Mark? What a place that is. Legendary place. Some of the biggest bands ever before they got their big start. Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix was over there playing as well. But there's some great Camden. What an area it is of characters and a lot of talented people and musicians. Amy Winehouse, there was this pool table. They all signed off on it, and that's where they used to play before they made it big. But I still say the best music in the world comes out of the UK. Liverpool. You agree? No comment?
Yeah. It's kind of not my cup of tea. The only ones that I really listen to that you just mentioned are Zeppelin.
Greatest band ever.
Which I think are the best rock band ever. So yeah. Robert Plant and Jimmy Page were geniuses.
Oh man. And then that rendition of Stairway to Heaven at the Kennedy, what's it called again? Where they make tribute to the rock bands and celebrities and entertainment. Hart came out and sang a live performance of Stairway to Heaven. Oh my God, was that?
Yeah.
Birmingham, you're right. Black Sabbath. That is true. I've been to Birmingham a few times. The NIA arena. All right, that wraps up things for today. Make sure to scan that QR code to get a quick analysis of what we thought about the latest news from Germany and what we can expect next. So if you want to get some of that insight, make sure to scan that QR code to become a daily baked-in newsletter subscriber, delivered to your inbox weekdays, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern time, giving you all the latest news and information on the business and reform side of the cannabis industry and a full recap of some of the takeaways from today's live stream. Don't forget to give this video a like. Make sure to share it with your network and feel free to leave some comments below. Love to get your feedback. Anthony, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. I'll see you back here Friday at 11 a.m. Eric Berlin is going to be coming on from Denton's, where we talk about a few things. ALJ
we
hearing.
Some rescheduling news, hopefully by then.
Yeah, well, that'd be nice.
Yeah.
ALJ rescheduling and what his thoughts were on that announcement last week for the Trump administration about their drug policy initiatives for 2025, what that might mean. But I know it wasn't the news that we wanted right now. But as I said in a video yesterday, you can check it out actually on our channel right now. It's evolving. It's not written in stone. So don't jump to conclusions. So he'll be on Friday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern time. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, everyone. We'll see you back here on Friday at 11 a.m. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Now, that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.